God has reconciled the books. He has a way of reconciling things, balancing life, giving you beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. God has a way of giving it back to you. Oh, I know you're hurt right now, but God will make it up to you. Oh, you didn't get it how you wanted it. You didn't get it from who you wanted it. But God has a way of making sure that every injustice will be corrected. Weeping may endure for a night. So when he finishes blessing his children, each one of them prophesying to them, he folds his legs up in the bed and gave up the ghost.
Broadcasting from Fredericksted, St. Croix, 101.7 FM.
And the text starts out, he has just expired with all of his sons around the bed. Let's do forensics. The Bible says, and Joseph fell on Jacob's neck, and he wept, and he cried, my father is gone. My father, all I lived for, all I worked for, the thing that kept me alive in the prison is gone. The thing that I held on to when people lied on me and betrayed me is gone. Do you know how many nights I slept in the jail cell hoping to see my daddy again, and my daddy is gone. And Joseph fell on his neck and he wept over his father. What a loss. What a loss. He lost a part of himself. Joseph was in some ways Jacob's mini-me. They were both blessed men of the same God in the same way. And Joseph lost the one who believed in him. Who believed in him before he was in the chariot. And when you find somebody who believes in you before, oh my God, that's a wonderful thing. I can't even talk about that. Anybody can believe in you after. But if you got somebody who believed in you before, there's a special law for them. And I almost read over it in the grief of the moment and the sadness of the situation. I almost read over it, but when I did forensics, and I started to slice the text, I had to get past this bond between Jacob and Joseph and start asking questions. And my first question is, where are the other brothers? You are all around the bed when the blessings are passed out? How does Joseph weep alone for a father who had 12 sons? If you can get 1 out of 12. If somebody gets you, don't hope for everybody to get you, but if somebody really appreciate, you've done well. Jacob blessed all of them, raised all of them, fed all of them. Why is the one who wasn't even at home doing the most weeping? The one he fed the least, loved him the most, and the ones he did the most for gave him the least. It wasn't that they weren't there, sis. They were there. They didn't weep. They saw it with an aloofness. They had had to be there because they were gathered around the bed. Why are they not laying on his neck weeping? Joseph lost the most because Joseph had the capacity to love the most. Everything that knows how to live doesn't know how to love. The Bible says, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good. The Bible says that Joseph fell on his neck and said, I lost my father. I lost my inspiration. The one I was going to prove that you weren't wrong when you gave me the coat of many colors. I really am who you think I am. I know I messed up and I was in jail and I went through a whole lot of mess and I got fired and I lost my job and I've been enslaved and everything, but you wasn't wrong. Look, see, Daddy, I made it. Daddy, I made it. Daddy. I made it. I was so distracted by who was weeping that I didn't notice who wasn't. Notice who does not weep. Notice who has no natural affection. Notice who can see you suffer and be indifferent and look the other way while you go through pain. Pay attention when those who should care do not. It tells you that there's something wrong. There's something wrong when somebody could give you that much and you could stand to the side and let them die and never reach over to say, my father. So as I started cutting into the text, I started to see something. Joseph loved his father so that he used his favor on his father and called for the physicians to embalm Jacob. And the Bible says, I want to read it just like it said it because it's good. This is good. Wait a minute, just wait a minute. I want to read it. This is good. This is good. Yeah. It doesn't say the physicians embalmed Jacob. It says the physicians embalmed Israel. Yeah, she came from my church. I can tell it. The physicians embalmed Israel. Is this not prophetic? Is this not profound? That the physicians embalmed Israel. And it took them 40 days to get it done. 40 days for the Egyptian physicians to embalm Israel. If they would have understood the embalming, they would have known that the embalming is prophetic, that they would be enslaved for 400 years, that they would be embalmed, that a nation of people would be embalmed by slavery, and that took 400 years, but the shadow took 40 days. And for 40 days they wept, and they thought they were weeping for the old man. But they should have been weeping for themselves. For what happened to the old man is a shadow of what would happen to his descendants. And Egypt embalmed Israel. Now you must understand, it was not the custom of the Egyptians to embalm
Broadcasting from Frederiksted, St. Croix, 101.7 FM.
This embalming was reserved for pharaohs. way they preserve the bodies is still legendary, still studied to this day. The mummies are still preserved even to this contemporary day. They spared no expense in embalming Israel. To this day, the bodies of the mummies are preserved. It took 40 days of the Pharaoh's choicest physicians to do this. The complicated process is deep. I don't even want to go into it. It might be too much for some of you to understand of how they preserved the body and emptied it out and took out all of the brains and the entrails and all of that and preserved it to last. You don't spend that kind of money on the daddy of a cellmate. Jacob is being honored in a favor that he had nothing to do with. He is being honored with a favor that is the result of being connected to somebody with favor. Always know where your blessings come from. Always know where your blessings come from. Don't get so caught up in the blessing that you don't understand the only reason you got that blessing is because you was connected. Don't get high-minded and start walking in your flesh. The only reason they did it is because Joseph told him, that's my daddy. And they embalmed him like he was a king. And it took them 40 days to prepare that old man's body. And for 40 days, they wept. I don't know whether they were weeping over the loss of Jacob or the grace that his father would be treated like a Pharaoh. He came to Egypt out of a famine, and he leaves as a Pharaoh. Good God Almighty. Hey! Your story ain't over yet. You're not going to leave out the way you came. You might have came in hungry, but before it's over, oh my God. And isn't that how Israel came to Egypt anyway? They came out of the famine, but they left with all of the wealth of the Egyptians, so much so that the Pharaoh was trying to get it back. Everything that's happening to the old man is happening to the nation, for the nation left with the wealth of Egypt. The death of the old man is prophetic to the state of the nation of Israel. When they embalmed him and the 40 days was completed, somebody say 40 days. 40 days. When the 40 days was completed, which was a type of the 400 years, then Joseph sends to Pharaoh, probably unable to go to him because he had touched the dead, and says, if I have found favor in your sight, let me bury my father at home. Now I'm going to take him back to Canaan. Let's do forensics on that. It tells me that nothing Joseph had and nothing that Jacob owned had made him forget who he was. It tells me that the trick to having favor and maintaining favor is no matter how high you go, always be rooted in where you came from. Now I understand why the Bible says Joseph is a bow whose branches reach over the wall. You may reach over the wall, but don't get so engrossed in reaching over the wall that you stop acting like where you came from and you lose loyalty to your roots. He said, I got blessed over here, but when everything is said and done, take me back home. And then let's cut another layer and go a little bit deeper. It tells me that God will bring you back full circle. That the same people that saw you leave hungry will see you come back full. It tells me that God has a way of working it all out. I feel like preaching this morning. I don't know who I'm talking to, but God gave me a word for you. He said, so when they asked Pharaoh, if Joseph said, if I have found favor in your sight, let me go bury my father. Now that's a risk. Suppose you don't come back. You were a prisoner. Not only does Pharaoh let him go, he sends all of his support and regiments. Here they go escorting Joseph and his father across the desert. So that the Amalekites and the Hittites and the Jebusites would not attack them along the way. When you saw Pharaoh's soldiers marching beside the body, you knew this was royalty. And if you mess with him, you'd have to fight Pharaoh. Oh, let me tell you, I might not be much by myself, but if you mess with me, you're going to have to mess with the one who sent me. I'm not in this battle by myself. Somebody shout yes. If I had time, I'd show you that yes, shout out your horse. I'd show you how they had wrapped him in strips of linen, the body, in a mummy style, and carried him across the desert after the same fashion that you would see the Ark of the Covenant carried 400 years later. Yeah, I would show you that if I had time. If I had time, I would show you how this is a type of the tabernacle that we would see 400 years later. We would see the linen strips moving through the wilderness. And if I had time, I would tell you that I went back and did some research. They didn't take him back to Canaan the short route. Oh, let me hear you. They took him the long way, the same route that later their children's children would have to walk. And I tell you, you may be going through something right now, and you think you're the first one to go through it, but there's always a forerunner who has gone the path before you as a testament that if I could go through it, you could go through it too. Everybody with him, all his brothers and all his servants, all his adjutants, everybody but the children, they all took the journey together back to the promised land to bury their father. And they took the westward route, the longer route, the distant route to get back home. And when they got back to the promised land, and the strangers that had inhabited the land saw the escorts and the majesty, they thought Jacob was an Egyptian for the escort that was provided. And they brought them up to a place and went no further, because in order to go into the tombs of Abraham, that was a family matter. No witnesses were allowed. It reminded me of Abraham and Isaac going up on the mountaintop and told the servants, stay here. Me and the lad are going yonder to worship. There's a lot of folk that start with you, that can't end with you. There's a lot of people that start out, but you can only take them so far. It comes to a point that you can say, where I'm getting ready to go now, you can't go with me because you're not related to me. You're not connected to me. You don't have the same DNA. You don't have the same spirit. This is family business. That's why when Jesus was on the cross, That's why the sun went black, because God didn't want us to be able to witness what was happening to the sun on the cross. So he put out the sun in the sky so he could deal with the sun on the cross, because some stuff is family business. If you're not kin with me, you can't go with me. Come on, somebody. Somebody shout hallelujah. And so there they are. And they took Jacob and they laid him in what he owned. They laid him in what was his. They laid him in a prepared place. Go to prepare a place. They laid him in a prepared place. And that's when the brothers got nervous. Because all of a sudden they began to think, what's to keep him from not killing us now? Daddy's dead. Daddy's dead. Maybe he didn't kill us because Daddy was living. Couldn't believe that he could be that good of a person.